support for the Untold Radio Network family of shows and join in on the conversation by using super stickers and super chats on YouTube. Got a question you want answered? Ask it live via a super chat and get real-time responses from our show's knowledgeable hosts and guests. Help keep the Untold Radio Network shows running strong. We need your support. Send your super chats and stickers now.
Well, hello, world.
Yes,
it's Jay
hello.
Katz and Aspasia
That's
here.
right.
You're on Untold Radio, and this is episode 117,
17,
which
yep.
is just, I feel my age just dripping past, of Down South Anomalies. Yes, we are broadcasting from Sydney, Australia, in the beautiful Jordan Springs.
We are.
And we're on
Direct land.
direct land, and we want to pay our respect and acknowledgements to elders past, present, and emerging.
Mm-hmm.
And acknowledge the fact that the Indigenous culture is probably far more aware of the anomalous world than we will ever be. But
Well, we're slowly getting there.
it's held in sacred knowledge.
We're slowly getting there.
Well, I tell you what, the world is rapidly getting there.
Well, it's understanding that there is more than what we've been told and what we can see, feel, and touch.
Anyway.
Oh, feel and touch is the same thing, isn't it?
You make me giggle because...
Do I?
Anyway, look, I just want to thank Ross Coldheart for that astounding interview.
It was great interview last week.
You know, here lies the rub, the reality. People go, you're going to go viral with Ross. You really are. Now, we've had this thing for decades where no matter what level of fame someone else has, and Ross gets minimum 150,000, maybe a couple of million.
Yeah.
We've got him up to 1,500. That is nothing in comparison. So excuse us, Ross, for humbling your career. But we destroy everyone's notion of celebrity.
Well, we don't destroy it. We just bring it down to our level.
To our wake.
And what
You'll
a level.
never go viral again.
And what a level. Anyway, it's all good. But, you know, you and I have been people that have gotten to our audience one at a time, literally.
Yeah, it's
literally
exhausting.
one at a
it
time.
Really is.
But when you've been doing it for like
now we're in
30 years.
Yeah, more than that, actually.
30 years plus, the numbers do start to accumulate, but it does take a long time. So, but you know what? We actually touch people on a very personal level.
Yeah, well, I hope we don't go further than
well,
that.
not physical, but personal level.
Thank you,
Aspasia. Yeah, that's who we are.
Well, today's episode is entitled Meteors, Blackouts, and Anomalous Atmospheric Oscillations.
Whatever that means.
Well, that means that, you know, I was thinking the other day, you and I have subscribed for maybe 20 years to 40 in Time.
Yes, we have.
And when we were looking for strange stories in the world that we live in, we always could rely on 40 in Times. We might be able to rely on the newspaper services, Reuters or whatever, but 40 in Times. But now, no matter where we turn, it is everywhere. We are living in the midst of the highest strangeness ever. And it's the sun breaking through in this cast here because we're in the early morning. So don't worry about our colour shading is going crazy.
It's the, now I forgot.
But it is a strange time because never before.
That's what I was going to say, that so many weird stories are in the mainstream, make it to the mainstream.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's changed a lot since,
2017 and onwards. You know, I mean, the amount of ridicule we used to cop for just the areas of curiosity that we would never bring a hypothesis to bear on.
Usually I never used to say to people what do what we were looking into, what we were researching, because I know the look. I've seen that look thousands of times.
It's not the look of love, I'll tell you that
definitely.
much.
Well, it's the look of, like, they look at you, they glaze over, there's this glaze comes across their face, and then they just roll their eyes. And I'm like, okay.
These people are kooks.
Well, no. Well, they think that. But I think, okay, these people know nothing about the subject. What they're going on is their own perception
spot on
of the very little that they know or what they've seen in the mainstream media.
Right.
And so I can't actually explain or have a conversation with this person, because this person is going from their personal opinion, which is nothing. Well, it's nothing. If you haven't researched something, if you haven't read up on it, then you don't know anything about it, really. You just know what you've seen and heard, which is the mainstream ridicule, which that's what it was. So I just usually go, you know what, don't worry about it. We can't.
I've lost a shoulder.
When you've gone and had a discussion, when you've gone and done some research and looked into it, then maybe come back to me and then we can have maybe a halfway decent discussion about it. But otherwise, see you later.
I've lost a shoulder.
That's okay. You'll be all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you're exactly right. And look, we have searched. We're on an existential journey. Like most people have been touched by this huge array of anomalous phenomena that this mysterious world gives us to be intrigued by. But I did stumble onto a beautiful gentleman, Michael Talbot,
yes,
who may have a theory that actually puts all the contradictions into place. So we'll have a look at the incredible work of Michael Talbot at the end of this cast, and his one book that sent shockwaves through the scientific community, The Holographic Universe.
Yeah.
And it's not the way you and I perceive the hologram.
No, it's not. It's not. It's totally different.
So fascinating. We'll hear from that in his words. But we have to stop here. I mean, one of the reasons why we've been a bit AWOL, a bit higgledy-piggledy, is we have some illness in the family and we're thinking positively about those family members, and family comes first, then the podcast.
Yeah.
That's the way it works with us.
Yes.
And so with that sadness in our hearts, it's with great sadness that we actually, during this week, witnessed the passing of one of the most incredibly powerful, courageous individuals out there that literally brought, Weinstein and Ghislaine Maxwell down, and that is Virginia Giuffre, who had Epstein. Epstein. It's the Steam. Forgive me.
Epstein.
Thank you.
Yeah.
They're all as notorious as each other, aren't they?
They're not the nicest people. That's for sure.
And so her supposed suicide, which your father
that's all very, because leading up to her supposed suicide,
bizarre.
There was this weird stuff that I know, weird stuff that went on. Who knows? But
the amount of shaming and assault that has come out of primarily Britain on her is just disgraceful.
Well, Prince Andrew, I think he was the Queen's favourite, and
he has to have his teddy bears arranged in a certain way every night.
Look,
do you know that story?
I know the story. I just can't. I can't listen. No, it's not. I can't fathom. I just can't listen to these people who are so privileged,
entitled.
They're so privileged. They're so lucky to have, landed where they have. And then they just turn into disgusting human beings with no thought for anyone else except themselves.
I think the only justice we can ever have in this electronic media-driven world is to actually get the elites and put together like a series of reality shows like Survivor and Naked and Afraid. And that for one, we strip them of all that entitlement and we put them in the middle of the wilderness and see how they'll go.
It doesn't matter how they go. The problem is that all of us down here on ground level, all of us that live in this universe, not that universe of the privileged, because they live in a totally different world.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? We don't even understand that world. But those people, everyone who's down here aspires to that.
Really?
And, don't they?
Well, I don't.
Isn't it? Well, okay, let's say the majority of people aspire to that. And so this is why
sort of a goal
they have millions of people, every star,
fawning over them.
Every celebrity has, a Twitter account, a Facebook account, all of those things. And they have millions of followers and they're like, oh, so-and-so is my friend on such and such. It's like, no, they're not. They don't even know you exist, you moron. What is wrong with you? They've got millions and millions of followers. That you think they know you? You think that they've even looked at who you are? They don't give a crap about you.
You know what? It's taken us 117 podcasts, but I keep hearing that Diana Ross song.
Oh, which one?
I'm coming out. I get a feeling that you are coming right out.
The more and more, I've been looking at lots of crime documentaries and, worst roommate ever, worst partner, I'm a stalker, I'm a murderer, I'm a this. And I just, people, the human condition is so damaged. I don't know what the hell goes on.
Then you pulled
No. It is so damaged and we do such horrible things to each other. I don't know how we're ever going to get.
We are digressing here.
Get beyond. No, we're not. This is what it's all about.
I guess it is. Listen, what I want to say is we want to dedicate this show for what it's worth to Virginia. She is survived with 3 beautiful children. And, sad for any children to have lost their mother at such a young age.
Their parents, horrible.
And believe me, I mean, there are so many other people that could have stood up and given their name and haven't. So she is really one courageous soul.
And I think she's paid for it. I think that's what I'm trying to say is that, because she stood up and spoke out, that she's been, I don't know.
The amount of threats,
it's helped her demise, Yeah.
It's very sad. Very sad.
Anyway.
And exploited, here's the mere fact that the elites always exploit the most vulnerable in our community.
Well, they're not going to be able to exploit someone like me, that's for sure. Okay. I can see them coming a mile away.
All right.
Okay. So they do. They do exploit the most vulnerable and the people that want that, They want that, but they're never going to get it. There's not enough room in that universe. This is what people don't understand. There's not enough room in that universe for all of us to live there, to be affluent and be privileged.
Well, for every affluent person, there has to be hundreds of thousands that are poor.
Yeah, absolutely.
To sustain that other person's affluence.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Exactly. I think people don't realize that.
And life is too short. You come to the end of it and realize that that material stuff
and then if everybody's affluent, then what's the point of difference with everyone else? These people want to be at the top of the heap, and there's not enough room at the top of the heap.
Well, we all breathe the same oxygen. We're all cut. We all bleed. So there is not much point of difference.
All right, let's stop with that because
That's what I meant. That's what I meant. Anyway, okay. Thank you for being here and thank you for putting up with us. And, it's the way it is. Let's step back into April 21st, 22nd, something that's been occurring for over 2,000 years.
So that was a couple of weeks ago.
A very unfortunate name for this comet, the Thatcher comet.
Right.
So it's carrying a lot of extra baggage, right?
Yeah.
And the Lyrid Meteor Shower. Now, this is a very interesting meteor shower, and we'll actually put a link to our man in the space race. He's up there with Ellie in space, but here's the ultimate for you and I. The angry
astronaut's hilarious.
The angry astronaut has done an incredible piece about this meteorite shower because there were some distinct anomalies here in Australia that were viewed.
So you witnessed that, didn't you?
I didn't realize I was witnessing it. And
you thought it was lightning.
A novelist researcher, and I had an 8K camera at my fingertips
and didn't use it
for 4 hours.
Oh my
here
God!
In Jordan Springs.
That's insane.
We would be looking to the northwest there, and we were seeing what looked like lightning
coming up from the ground.
From the ground.
Yeah.
And I'm going, what is this?
Yeah, well, you should have realized then that wasn't lightning.
I should have at least put a camera over it for a few minutes.
Yeah.
But anyway, the angry astronaut's done a piece. It's called UFO Explodes Over Australia, Not a Meteor, claim some astronomers. It's a new UAP outbreak.
Right.
And ever since that point, it brought to my attention that we are going into our version of the drone invasion.
Oh, okay.
And we have been seeing objects all across this continent, and especially in Tasmania. What's wrong with my hands?
Your hands are making funnies. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for that. So it was odd, but evidently scientists from the University of Southern Queensland said that the first objects that were seen were moving extremely fast too fast for a meteorite.
Okay.
They were moving at the highest speed that a meteorite enters our atmosphere.
Yeah.
They went down to very low altitude. They did something most meteorites don't do, and that is they created sonic booms.
Okay.
So something was
There's
going
something
on
other.
here.
It's other.
And this was a bit other. So let's have a look at some of the images from that meteorite shower.
Okay.
I mean, that is huge.
That is
we'll get a clearer image in a minute.
Yeah, that is a big.
Wow. Okay, let's move on. I mean, this went on for hours. That's the extraordinary thing about this.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but let's just get a little.
Those who had their eyes to the skies last night were dazzled by the Lyrid Meteor Shower, lighting up the skies of Brisbane and regional New South Wales. Stargazers with patience and prime viewing spots witnessed fiery streaks blazing across the stars, fueled by Comet Thatcher's debris trail. The annual celestial display once again showcasing the greatness of space skies and maybe terrifying anyone who was driving on the roads and not aware that it was happening.
I just think.
Yeah, very interesting. And, you know, as I was saying there, it went on for hours. Look, so it really deserves a little bit more research.
If this is an annual event, how come I've never heard of it before?
Well, I've got no idea. What circles are you moving in, my dear? Really?
Same ones as you.
Oh, that's right. Okay. For over 2,000 years, it's been observed.
Okay.
So, you know, I don't know how annual it is, but it is something that is quite
annual
frequent.
means once a year.
Yeah. And look, before you actually go, they were just meteorites. Let's remember that R.V. Loeb, the world's leading astrophysicist, came out here recently to recover, after more than a decade, meteorite fragments off the coast of New Guinea. And those meteorite fragments are proving to be rather anomalous.
Unusual.
And the reason why their attention was drawn to those fragments is the speed of the meteorite just did not match what would be capable for a meteorite to hold it together when it's reaching Earth's atmosphere and survive.
Yeah.
So fascinating. We should keep an eye on meteorites. Now, let's cut over to Europe, specifically Spain, Portugal, and parts of France.
The blackouts.
Because something astounding occurred. And, you know, historically, you and I are aware that the ufological world is full of sightings and then blackouts. Now, I'm not saying this had anything to do with the ufological
They kind of go,
world.
but they do go hand in hand. If you look at historically at these things that have happened, there's a correlation.
Always something
there's
else. It's a bit like us thinking that Point Pleasant was the only place in the world that the Mothman appeared.
Yeah, it wasn't.
As the harbinger of doom, you realise later on it was Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island. It was a tsunami in Japan. People were seeing these huge winged creatures. And so there is that notion of the Thunderbird dating back into
Indian, North American Indian culture. Mythology.
Yes.
Culture. Yeah.
So let's check out a news report, an Aussie one, of course, because that's where we're from. And sometimes, like with Ross Coulthard, and I never said this to him during the podcast, I was going to say, Ross, do you find that as an Australian journalist, it's actually easier to get a better handle on what's happening in the US when you that tyranny of distance, when you're away from the noise of that signal?
Sure.
So I found this a very completest news report on what was going on.
Those who had their eyes to the skies last night were dazzled by the...
Spain remains in a state of emergency tonight after one of the biggest electrical blackouts in Europe's history. This is a live look at Madrid's main train station. It's just gone 10 a.m. Many of these passengers have spent the night sleeping on the ground. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, with the outage causing chaos across 3 countries.
Traffic chaos and confusion. Drivers stuck at a busy intersection after the lights went out. Underground train networks plunged into darkness. Services brought to a halt, passengers forced to walk along the tracks, others stranded far from their destinations. It's the result of a massive blackout which occurred at lunchtime, spanning Spain, Portugal and parts of France. Tens of millions, mostly across the Iberian Peninsula, suddenly without electricity.
And all the power went out. They evacuated the entire building. We got out in the streets. There was people pouring into the streets.
Melbourne man Craig White and his wife and daughter were inside Madrid's Museo del Prado, the Spanish capital, which has more than 3 million residents, one of the worst affected cities.
All the bars were shut, all the restaurants were shut. You couldn't use credit cards, you couldn't get petrol out of petrol pumps.
It triggered crisis meetings, Spain's Prime Minister calling the outage unprecedented. And hours later conceding we still have no conclusive cause, while ruling nothing out. Amid speculation of a possible cyber attack, Portugal's power grid operator blamed it on a rare atmospheric phenomenon, where there was an extreme imbalance of temperatures. Whatever it was, it impacted virtually everything from transport to ATMs and internet and phone services.
Well, anything that uses electricity.
Isn't that astounding? And it raises so many questions. And I mean, the outage was there for about 24, 36 hours.
That's a long time.
Brought that part of Europe to a complete halt.
That's a huge part of Europe. That's 3 countries.
It doesn't remind you of a film. And this I find odd now that Michelle and Barack Obama only produced one film for Netflix. If you're going to go on and start producing features, where's the next series of features coming out? But predicting pop culture,
Leave the world behind.
Leave the world behind. With Julia Roberts and Ethan Hawke. Makes me think it's very similar to what's happening here. Are they preparing us for the grid to go down?
Here's the thing.
And how frightening it is when the grid does go down.
Well, see, people just assume.
We can't survive without electricity.
No, everything is connected to electricity now. It's like nothing works without electricity. That's it. You've got no lights. You've got no communication. You've got, no entertainment. You can't use money because everybody's gone electronic. You can't purchase anything. You don't.
Cash
you
is
just
back.
Well, do you think they want us to go back?
I've got a news report somewhere. I'll have a check for it where they go. We're using cash for the first time in years.
Yeah, well, I haven't stopped using cash. I like my cash. I don't.
Well, they charge you extra on the card. So
well,
why
that's
wouldn't you
the
use
problem.
cash?
It's like they made us go to card, and then they said, well, you're going to pay for the privilege of using your card. It's like for us to keep your money in our bank and do whatever we want.
So the statement was made that 5 gigawatts, you don't want to lose a millionth of a gigawatt, because 5 gigawatts was 60% of their power infrastructure went down.
Yeah.
And it went down in 5 seconds.
That's just insane.
And so they were thinking to begin with, oh my God, it's a cyber attack. But then the only thing they've been able to extrapolate, and it's fairly broad and vague and obscure, is that it was, the alteration in temperature.
What a load.
Man, it was rare atmospheric oscillations.
They've just made up.
That's what I was witnessing during the live.
They have made up a bunch of words now. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like they made up this thing, ball lightning. It's like that's ball lightning. We
the
don't know what it is, but we're calling it ball lightning.
The only other thing I can think is that part of Europe is extremely transitioning to reusable energies.
Right.
So it might be one way of saying you can't do that. We've still got to have coal infrastructure backing it.
Yeah, but your coal infrastructure went down. It was your coal infrastructure that went down. It wasn't. It was the electricity. It's like they haven't changed over to. It was running on electricity still, right? So the electricity went down.
Yes.
That doesn't make any sense.
Let's check another little report.
That's a huge.
As authorities in Spain and Portugal work to get the whole of the Iberian Peninsula reconnected to the power grid, questions are being asked what caused the 2 countries to suddenly go offline. A massive outage hit at around lunchtime on Monday, plunging businesses and transport networks into chaos.
En lo que respecta a las causas,
about the cause, what the Red Electrica technicians are telling us is that at 12:33 this afternoon, 15 gigawatts of generation were suddenly lost from the system, and that they were lost in just 5 seconds. This is something that has never happened before.
Well, I got the 5 seconds right. It's 15 gigawatts, but I tell
whatever.
you still lose a minute.
What about
to
the
that.
people that would have been caught in elevators?
They were caught in elevators.
Oh my
they were caught in
God.
trains.
Oh, just horrible. If you
for hours.
Yeah, if you were caught in an elevator, you ain't getting out.
No.
You know what I mean? Until it starts moving again, and you're plunged in darkness as well. Oh, and if you were, I don't even want to.
We need to think outside of the square because
stairs from now.
The possibility of this occurring.
Well, if it happened once.
Well, it's 5 seconds away.
Yeah, yeah.
And we're too reliant on it.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. Do we carry a rope ladder with us? Do we carry like a claw hammer with us?
You need a backpack. You need a generator.
AI is not going to help you in the midst of that stuff.
Well, AI goes down, you're done. You know, there is no AI when there's no electricity. Anyway, it's quite frightening, you know. It is really, really frightening. I think I
think it's really important that we actually, a lot of that story is being dismissed rather quickly, and I think it's a really important
It's like, okay,
story.
moving on. Yeah.
Well, it hasn't directly affected the other countries, so we're all just going, oh, well, that's just Europe,
that's just an anomaly, and it's never going to happen again.
That's Portugal,
yeah, but,
things
doesn't
happen.
matter. If it happened there, it can happen anywhere, whatever it was that triggered it. And until they find out what it was, then it's possible that it could happen somewhere else again. And you've kind of got to be careful. You don't want to be caught in the midst of that. And I tell you what, I don't want to be caught in an elevator because you're plunged into dark with a whole bunch of people in there. Oh my God. That's just frightening. Anyway.
Jean Lewis Bunwell's Exterminating Angel. I mean, you better hope you bring some sort of glass or cup with you because the human condition. I'm getting a GT stripe in my shirt here as the sun bleaches through.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important that both those topics need to be researched more extensively.
Yes, they definitely do.
Meteorite shower that mightn't have been a meteorite shower or might have been partially containing some other elements of anomalies.
There was an anomalous element to it. And so that needs to be.
You know what? Watching it here,
a meteorite shower.
They were speculating you're seeing 18 to 20 meteorites come down an hour. What I was seeing was a lightning flash literally every 30 seconds.
Yeah, right.
For 4 hours.
Yeah, right.
I just got so blasé with it in the end. I went back to doing writing.
Yeah, okay. It's lightning in reverse. It's coming up from the ground. You thought that was okay.
All right. That's the great power of this down south anomalies in our investigative skills. You know, we have searched for years for some sort of explanation. You know, we started off with looking at the ET hypothesis when it came to ufology, and we pulled back far from that.
Yeah, we
took in Jacques Vallée's notion. I think Jacques Vallée's just done an extraordinary podcast with Ross Coulter.
He has.
So go up on the News Nation and check that out.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, how old is Jacques Vallée now?
I thought you told me, I thought he was dead.
He was one of the brains behind the internet as well.
He was.
Which was quite astounding.
Yeah.
And we searched for these ideas, but there was a book written quite a few decades ago by a gentleman who's no longer with us, who died very young, Michael Talbot.
All right, yes.
Synchronicity in the Holographic Universe. The whole is contained in every part. We're talking about subatomic unity.
Right.
That every single cell in us is completely aware of the universe itself. And I think he speculates this from the notion of electrons. We all know that those subatomic particles, even though we can't see them, we can measure them.
Sure.
No matter what distance they are apart from each other.
Are all connected?
They're all connected. Wow. They all correspond.
Okay. All
Let's get a bit of that from Michael himself.
At a deeper level, a very holographic level of reality, every particle in the universe collapses to a sort of cosmic unity. They're not signaling each other. And so what that means, talking about words, is that there is no separation between electrons. Furthermore, there's no separation between people. And this has all kinds of very boggling implications, one of which is that we've always tried to understand, for example, psychic phenomena, like how could I get information out of your head and my head, as some sort of signal going back and forth. But if we're organized, if we live in a universe that's organized holographically, you no longer have to tackle it that way. It could be that I have the entire universe and every neuron, every cell, every atom, every electron in my head, and you do also. So when we can access that, we can access information that seems to be beyond our normal sensory reach.
To further understand this idea, you can download my holographic mind principle. link in the description.
Isn't that fascinating? And
well, that was he really summed it up really
It's
quite
so
in
eloquent.
layman's terms so we could understand what he was talking about. That's just,
So we'll get to him.
Yeah.
And he had a similarity to a lot of debunkers in the scientific field.
So what was his time frame? When was he around?
That book, I think, was penned in the 80s, maybe the early 90s.
Okay.
And then that's when he was around, and he only lived into his late 30s.
What happened? He died, obviously.
Well, there was a lot of intrigue, and I need to do more research, but evidently it was a form of leukemia or cancer. But a lot of people suspect that this man came up with a theory that resolved it all, and who knows? Who
can't
knows?
have that, can we?
I'm not actually stating that occurred,
not,
but
it was suspicious.
Where I'm going to hear it now is that there is always a reason behind protesting or being offended. There's a reason behind it. When you get to scientists in the academic world that have always debunked anomalous phenomena, from Michael Persinger with his bike helmet
Susan
full of
Blackmore.
you always find that somewhere early in their life
they had an anomalous
experience.
Yeah.
Well, Michael Talbot takes the cake.
I'd like to push the boundaries even further now, Michael, and I know that you've had personally some UFO types of...
And I'm going to stop there and tell people to be aware of a program that has been remastered. It's from the 80s and 90s, and it is so profound, and it's where this piece comes from. It's called Thinking Aloud.
Right.
We'll do a link to it in our show notes.
I'd like to push the boundaries even further now, Michael, and I know that you've had personally some UFO types of experiences very much related to the sorts of things that Whitley Strieber reports, and I wonder if you wouldn't mind narrating for us what happened to you and how you've come to view these experiences.
Yeah, I don't mind at all, and they were actually started with something that doesn't seem to be a UFO experience, but when I was 3 years old, I have a memory in my head, and I don't know where it began or where it ended, but it's absolutely vivid to this day, of this woman. I call her a woman, but I don't know, it might just have been an androgynous being, a figure with long white hair wearing a long white robe, taking me out of my bed and walking me through a woods. And I was terrified because I was dark and I didn't know who this person was. The only way that I could deal with it was to sort of tell myself this has got to be my mother, even though this did not fit the physical description of my mother. We got to the shore of a lake, and this entity that said to me, "Are you afraid, Michael?" And I said, "Yes, I'm very afraid." And it said, "Then hold your hand palm upward toward the moon." I did that, and it said, "Now close your hand," very slowly. And as I did that, I felt a softness in my hand, a palpable softness, like when you hold your hand outside a car window and feel the wind. But there was no wind blowing through my hand. And this being said, "Do you feel that?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Then," or it said, or he said, "Then I want you to remember, Michael, whatever happened in your life, don't ever be afraid, because for you the darkness is soft." And it was a very comforting message. And then a couple of years later, I told my mother about it, and she didn't quite know what, said no, took you out or whatever. And, again, when you're a child, you don't process these things intellectually. You just accept the world in a sort of magical way.
How old would you say you were?
I think it was about 3 when this occurred. And when I was 5, my father and a friend saw a UFO come down in the woods near where my family's house was. And it was then obscured by the trees, but out of the trees came 2 figures. First, a man in a black business suit carrying an attaché case, which was completely absurd, and at the time we did not know that this is a common motif in UFO lore, that in UFO experiences they're called the men in black. Of course, they don't make sense if they're extraterrestrials, unless they're like, extraterrestrial Amway salesmen or whatever, but so they were just, completely nonplussed by this experience. Then out of the woods came this figure with long white hair and a long white robe, and the man in the business suit vanished, walked off into the thicket and was gone. But the figure with the long white hair and the long white robe stopped in a cornfield and stood there. My father and his friend became very frightened, drove back because my mother, myself, and my father's friend's wife were camping out less than a mile from where this had occurred. They came back and they got us in the car and they said, "This amazing thing happened." They told us the story, drove us up. And when I looked at this being, I thought, oh, it's her. I always called her the woman in white. It's the woman in white But again, as a child, you don't necessarily even mention these things. I didn't say, oh, by the way, that's her to my parents. My father wanted to go see this being, talk to it and say, what are you, why are you here? My mother said, no, no, no. And finally, we watched it for about 10 minutes and finally drove away, not knowing quite what to do since everyone was too afraid to approach it. The next day, my father went back with a neighbor who taught astronomy at the local Grand Rapids Junior College. And they looked for the landing site of this thing that had come out, which looked like a green ball of light, came zooming out of the air. They couldn't find the landing site, but they did find the footprints of this being in this white robe, and they looked like little skis. They were pointed and very narrow, and they went back into the woods. They took photographs of the footprints with my father's hand next to him for size comparison. Unfortunately, the photographs have been misplaced, but there are lots of people who had seen them at the time. And that experience, after that occurred, is when the poltergeist phenomena manifested in the house. And it's become known now in UFO phenomena that poltergeist hauntings often follow UFO sightings. And this is further evidence that UFOs aren't just a purely objective phenomena. They seem to blow some sort of psychic doorway open in people when strange things start happening. And with me, I believe it blew some sort of gasket open that allowed this psychokinetic essence or energy to come out. And when I look at this and try to interpret it in terms of, as I say, extraterrestrials, it just doesn't make sense. I believe that, I don't quite know what it is, but I believe the universe has many, many levels of reality. I think UFOs are non-physical. I definitely think that we're not necessarily meant to interpret them at face value.
And when you say non-physical, are you implying that they're not part of this holographic reality either?
They're a different channel on the holographic television set, a different channel than our physical universe is on, is what I believe. And I think they're uncountable channels on the holographic TV. And probably as many civilizations and such a richness of life on those levels as there is on our own planet, in our own universe, probably. And that there are probably consciousnesses and civilizations that are advanced enough to bleed through. But maybe some of these things also, we don't, you know, they may be like just at the level of wildlife, you know, in their mentality, but on another level of reality. They may not be sophisticated, but they may have the ability to sort of manifest in a form that fools us. And actually what I think is going on is that when you encounter something that is truly of another reality, you can't, your perceptions and trying to pull it out of this blur of energy and make it into a hologram don't quite know how to put it into form. And so I think that the reason there are many psychological motifs in UFO experiences is because there's something going on, but the surface appearance is a product of the person's own psyche.
In other words, a lot of what's going on in these various holographic realities are like ink blocks.
Right. They can be interpreted like dreams as well, that they have psychological symbols in them. But they're also something real there, because UFOs can be tracked on radar. They leave circles, you know, on the ground. They leave traces of physical evidence. And so I think, I'm reminded there's a story, I don't know if it's apocryphal, I've never really been able to track it down. It's been attributed to Darwin Magellan, but something to the sense that if you use Magellan, that when Magellan first went ashore in Tierra del Fuego, that the natives saw that he came ashore in rowboats, but he left his ship anchored out in the harbor. And they said, well, how did you get here? And he said, in that ship. And they couldn't see the ship. And we certainly know that there's evidence of this. You know, there are tribes in the Gold Coast of Africa that can't see photographs, or can't see movies. And that there's sometimes, you know, that there seems to be our cultural upbringing imprints in us what we can perceive, that sometimes we literally can't perceive something because we don't have the vocabulary, the cultural and perceptual vocabulary to see it. I think UFOs fall into that category in a very extreme way, that they are so alien to our ordinary perception that our brain really pulls deep psychological baggage out of our psyches to hammer them into some form. And when we look at them and read them at face value, like that they're abductions or whatever, I think that we're looking at our own unconscious interpretation of the phenomena, and that we have to go deeper. We have to see beyond our own psychological baggage to truly begin to recognize and understand what's going on.
Well, it would seem to me that it's true that we've been blinded by our culture. We're very much like the people as described in Plato's cave, who can only see the shadows on the wall and not the light. But yet I feel that something's happening. There's a movement in the culture. The very fact that you can take rather respectable scientific concept like the holographic model of the brain and the holographic model in physics, and see that it can be, without a lot of stretching, used to incorporate many of these very things. And Pribram, for one, acknowledges that as well, suggests that, right or wrong, the model is helping us to open our eyes to these things.
I think so, yeah. It's interesting, there's sort of a bit of a movement afoot to begin to look at these things, you know, because it's kind of the story of the blind man and the elephant, where they go up, one touches the trunk, one touches the leg, and says, well, this animal's like a snake, no, this animal's like a tree, because they're not seeing the whole picture. And there are various researchers, for example, Ken Ring, who I mentioned earlier, the near-death experience researcher, who said, look, let's look at UFO experiences, let's look at shamanistic experiences, and let's look at near-death experiences, and look at their similarities. Maybe they're all portions of some proverbial elephant that we're missing. And I think he's right. I think that they're all experiences with the other channels on the holographic TV set, and when we interpret them at face value, they're extraterrestrials come here to abduct us and perform genetic research or whatever, we're being like the blind man and the elephant. Yeah. And we've got to look at the larger picture.
Yeah.
Mind blown.
I love that man. And I worship his spirit, and I will go through and read that book and find all material pertinent to him. Because if there's no separation between the electrons which are acted on, then, you know, it's easy to then take that and transfer it to us. There's no separation between us.
No,
we have all the knowledge inside of us.
So this is why some people, I see some people, I was watching some little girl, like, she was three, and she was being interviewed about the periodical table, and it was Ellen was showing. So she'd show her one of the symbols, and then she would go through and say what the chemical name was, like these huge long Latin names, and then she'd say that's salt, you know, another word, and she was. And it's like, so you go, now this child hasn't sat down and studied this stuff. It's in her. She's obvious, and it's not in her brain either. It can't be in her brain, right? So she's obviously she is tapping into something somewhere, and she's got an open line to it, whereas I don't. Because I look at those symbols and I have no clue of what they are, and I don't really care either. But it's just when I hear, you know, when I look at young children who are so intelligent, you know, those really special children that they're like 9 months and they're reading, you know that there's something else. Well, something else is going on there. And obviously we all have that capacity, but because of our, you know, whatever, our environment, our upbringing, our culture, we're unable to tap into it.
It's just
we're not
neurological conundrum about where does consciousness exist.
So,
you've heard of the uncertainty principle. And when it comes to memory, they were doing tests on lab rats, which those poor rats always cop it, throw them into a maze again.
Yeah.
But what they thought was, what we'll do is we'll remove a section of their brain matter.
Yes.
And we will find where memory is contained.
It's not.
They kept pulling it out. They got to the level where the rats could hardly even walk, but they could still get out of the maze.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you found with transplants, you know, people can have a liver transplanted and all of a sudden start having the qualities of the person that liver was transplanted from.
Look, I saw one where a child had some horrific accident and they had to take half the child's brain out. Right. And the brain just filled out and just was able to go back to where it was in a different way, but was able. So obviously it's not in the brain, physically in the brain. The brain is like almost a transmitter.
Yep.
Do you know, or a receiver.
Yep.
It's got to be a receiver.
And we've got to be so careful what we manifest. You know, as we were talking before about Leave the World Behind.
Yeah.
You know, recently you'd be aware of the film Civil War.
I didn't watch it. I couldn't
worried
watch it.
about that notion, that movie. That director and that production company have just done one of the most extreme films that goes beyond Saving Private Ryan on steroids called Warfare. I'd be careful with watching that as well.
Yeah, I don't want to see.
You've got to watch what you wish for.
Well, or what you put out there.
Yeah.
Because I truly, truly, truly believe we manifest we can manifest what we need.
This is the Stalker. This is Solaris.
Yeah,
and
it is.
we are Untold Radio's Down South Anomalies, coming to you from Sydney, Australia and Jordan Springs. My name's Jay Katz, and I'm always joined each week by my astounding wife, who will run over me like a semi-trailer at times to get her ideas out, and so she should. And that's what I love and admire about you so deeply.
Okay, so
and sometimes it scares the hell out of me. But,
yeah, sure,
it is a short one. But next week we have a returning guest.
We have David Thrussell.
David Thrussell is the singer, producer, the man behind Snog and Black Lung. He also has scored many mainstream feature films, TV series. He's an incredible writer. He's written articles for New Dawn and Nexus magazine. He's a great researcher.
He's a JFK aficionado.
He's one of music's biggest historians. He's going to look at that final data dump of the JFK documents.
Yes.
And he's also going to talk to us about some marvelous literature, because he does an astounding podcast on forbidden books.
Yes, he does.
It's like Dean's one on the weird libraries. We will actually put a link to that cast.
Yeah, well, that's next week. Anyway,
and that's next week. And then we've got like Ross Coulter. We've got a big interview coming up, but don't say who it is, because just in case we curse ourselves.
We've had big interviews coming up eventually. So well, you don't want to jinx anything.
Anyway, it's a short cast. We send our love out there primarily to Virginia Giuffre and those 3 children, her family, and the sorrow they must be going through. But just realize that she actually stepped outside of what most of us can't do as human beings and did something for the greater good of this planet and the people around us, which is an extraordinarily courageous, powerful, and astounding thing to do. And there's always frighteningly a price to pay for it.
No. But she's gone on to the next leg of her journey.
Well, hopefully now she's in a much more peaceful, loving place, and her consciousness exists.
I don't think anywhere could be as bad as here.
You know, when they talk about heaven and hell, I always think, gee, the people that have gone through sheer hell on earth, the last thing they need to do is leave this mortal coil and go to another
or
section.
Or think that there's a worse hell than what's already going on here for them. God.
And I want to throw my love out there. I'm John Ayres. Catherine Four Feathers, are you okay? Where's our moderators that we love so deeply?
We haven't been on there for a little while, so
So let's hope they're well. But bless all our moderators, all our subscribers, anyone that's just tuned in accidentally.
All our viewers. They're Malcolm and
never believe a word out of our mouth. Go and do the research yourself.
Absolutely.
But what we're here to show is that after 34 years of loving each other, that this creativity, being part of Untold Radio,
this year's going to be 35 years,
it brings us closer together every second. It does. Until eventually, let's hope our atomic party become one. And then we won't have to worry about sexuality, gender, all those fears.
Oh, those things that just a button pushing topics and stuff at the moment, which is quite frightening, because at the end of the day, we are actually all just human.
Yeah. Do you think you'll go and see Marsha Hines tonight? You've just got offered a ticket at 7 a.m. in the morning here in Sydney.
I probably will.
Well, give her my love, because last time I worked with her, she nearly killed me. But she is a great singer.
Maybe she was having a bad day.
Yeah.
Sometimes we all have a bad day. Anyway, we will be back next week with David Thrussell. And, hope your week or your weekend and the rest of next week is good for you.
Well, much love and respect to all of you. Take good care out there. You've been on Untold Radio's Down South Anomalies, episode 117. We're not stopping. We might have some moments where we have to stop to go in and care for our close members of our family, but we'll always be back with something to say, whether it's worthwhile or not.
Yeah,
well, that's up to your discretion.
Okay, bye.
Can't be stopped.